A grand wedding, a glowing bride, and a room full of powerful guests. But just as the vows were about to begin, a barefoot homeless boy stepped out of the shadows. Everyone froze. Security moved in, but then he grabbed the microphone, and what he said next left the entire room in tears and changed the lives of the bride and groom forever. Who was this boy? And why did the bride suddenly drop to her knees crying when she saw his face? This is not just a wedding story. This is a miracle in disguise. The grand hall shimmered under the golden glow of chandeliers, their crystals dancing in the soft light like stars. Laughter rippled through the crowd, mingling with the soft notes of a string quartet. In every direction, luxury spoke, from the polished marble floors to the silk-draped tables, from the $1,000 floral centerpieces to the gowns that sparkled like dreams. It was a wedding unlike any other, a celebration of love and legacy. At the heart of it all stood Claire Harrington, the bride, a radiant woman in a custom pearl-beaded white dress, and Daniel Whitaker, the heir to the Whitaker Foundation, a philanthropic empire that had funded orphanages, schools, and medical clinics around the globe. Everyone who was anyone in the city had gathered for this union business tycoons, politicians, celebrities, but none of them noticed the pair of eyes pressed against the tall glass window at the edge of the hall. He was small, thin, and no older than 10. His skin was a deep chestnut, sun-scorched and dusted with dirt. His curly hair was tangled, his shirt oversized and torn at the hem. Barefoot, he stood shivering slightly in the summer night air, unnoticed by the security guard, dozing off in his booth nearby. His name was Micah, and he was not here by accident. In his small, trembling hand, Micah clutched a folded photograph, edges frayed and smudged by time. He stared at the woman on stage, the bride, his eyes wide, unblinking, filled with something more powerful than hunger, recognition. 3 years ago, Micah had been just another shadow on the streets of Easton. No name anyone remembered. Number. Family, just another hungry child surviving on scraps. Until one rainy evening, a night so cold his fingers had turned blue, someone knelt beside him, a woman. Her face had been pale from the cold, her white coat soaked, but her eyes had been kind. She had wrapped her own coat around him, handed him her sandwich, and whispered something he never forgot. You matter. This world will see you one day. Don't give up. She never asked for his name. She never expected to see him again. But Micah remembered. And that face, the one now smiling beside a groom on stage, was hers. Claire Harrington. Micah's stomach growled, but he didn't move. His eyes were fixed on her like a sailor clinging to a lighthouse in the storm. She was his miracle, his anchor, and he had come against all odds to say thank you. Just hours earlier, he had overheard 2 kitchen staff near a church pantry talking about the Whitaker-Harrington wedding. He knew those names. He had stared at donation boxes with their logos before. He had slept beneath one of the clinics the foundation helped rebuild. It had taken him all day to find the venue, walking miles barefoot, ducking past cars and security guards, clutching that photo like it was his life's mission. He wasn't supposed to be here, but destiny didn't care about dress codes. Inside, the ceremony was reaching its climax. The host took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, as we celebrate this beautiful couple, they have requested to share a few words before we begin dinner. The applause was warm. Claire smiled as she stepped toward the microphone. Daniel gently squeezed her hand. Micah saw his moment. Before the guards could notice, before the next toast began, he slipped through a side door left ajar by a distracted waiter. The hall gasped. All heads turned as a barefoot boy in a torn shirt ran toward the stage, dodging between chairs, almost tripping on a woman's designer gown. Who let him in? Whose child is this? He's dirty, get him out. Security rose, but Micah was faster. He darted up the stairs, reached the silver microphone, and grabbed it with both hands before anyone could stop him. the room froze. Claire turned, her eyes locking on his face. She blinked, confused. And then pale. Daniel stepped forward. "Son," he said gently, "you can't." "Please," Micah interrupted, his voice shaking but firm. "Just 1 minute, please." The microphone trembled in his grip, his thin arms barely holding it steady. But his voice, though small, was clear. "3 years ago, I was on the street," he began, looking straight at Claire. "No home, no food, no name, no hope. I was just a shadow. People looked through me like I wasn't real." You could hear a pin drop. Micah unfolded the photograph, holding it up with trembling fingers. "One person saw me. She gave me her coat, her food, her words. She told me I mattered." He turned the photo toward the guests. A woman in a white coat knelt beside a tiny child on a wet sidewalk. It was blurry, old, but unmistakably real. Claire gasped. Her bouquet fell from her hands. "Oh my God," she whispered. The crowd murmured. Daniel looked at his bride in shock. "Claire, is this true?" She nodded slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks. He was freezing. I couldn't leave him, but I never saw him again." Micah's voice cracked. "I never forgot. That night, after she left, a man from your foundation found me. He gave me shelter. He gave me books. He gave me a second chance. And today," he paused, the room breathless, "I came to return the gift." Daniel stepped back, overwhelmed. Claire covered her mouth, weeping. Security guards hesitated at the edge of the stage, unsure what to do. No one moved. Micah reached into his pocket again and pulled out a small folded letter. "This is for you," he said. "From the director of the foundation. He told me to read it, in front of everyone." Claire's legs gave out. She dropped to her knees, sobbing. The chandelier above seemed to glow brighter. And as Micah unfolded the paper, his little hands shaking from fear and hope, everyone in that room knew something amazing was about to happen. The microphone trembled in Micah's hands. The letter, creased and stained from his long journey, seemed to weigh 100 pounds. The boy took a shaky breath as the entire wedding hall leaned forward. No one spoke. No one even blinked. Claire was on her knees now, her wedding gown pooled around her like snow at the foot of a mountain, tears running down her cheeks. Daniel, the groom, stood motionless, one hand gripping the edge of the podium. The air buzzed with silent awe. Micah began to read. "To the Whitaker family, years ago, your kindness planted seeds across the city, seeds that grew into hope. This boy, Micah, is one of those seeds. He is living proof that compassion still has power and generosity still has meaning." He paused, his voice cracking under the weight of those words. Then he continued. "Micah survived because someone cared enough to stop. Because your daughter saw more than a dirty face on the street. Because your foundation gave him more than money, it gave him worth." Gasps echoed through the hall. Several guests dabbed at their eyes. "This boy asked me for a chance to stand before you today. Not to ask for anything, but to give thanks. To remind all of us what one act of kindness can do. He has no last name. He has no home, but he has courage. And he has something to ask." Micah looked up. "Please," he whispered, his lips trembling. "Will you let me belong, even for just one day? I don't want money. I don't want pity. I just want to be seen, not as a burden, but as a boy who still believes in people." A collective silence fell like a curtain across the hall. Then Claire stood. Her body shook as she stepped forward, slowly, carefully, her high heels clicking softly on the marble. She knelt again in front of Micah, gently reaching for the photograph in his hand. She stared at it. Her fingers brushed the rain-splotched image, a snapshot of a memory that had haunted her heart in quiet moments. She looked up into Micah's wide, glistening eyes. Asterisk. "I remember that night," she whispered. "I remember thinking, I hope he grows up. I hope he survives. I never knew you carried this photo. Micah said nothing. His throat tightened too much to speak. Claire turned to the crowd. We do so much, she said, her voice loud and clear now, but we rarely see the results. We donate, we serve. But this, she turned to Micah, this is what it looks like when kindness grows. Suddenly, Daniel stepped beside her, placing a steady hand on Micah's shoulder. You're not a stranger anymore, Daniel said. You're part of this day, just as much as anyone here. The audience erupted in applause, tentative at first, then thunderous. Dozens stood. Some clapped with hands over their hearts. Others wiped away tears they didn't bother to hide. The groom's father, Mr. Whitaker Sr., who had built the family's foundation brick by brick, stood slowly from his chair in the front row. His silver hair gleamed beneath the chandelier light. He was known across the country as a serious man, a powerful man, a man who rarely showed emotion. He stepped forward with quiet dignity. The crowd parted. Micah turned to face him, standing tall, even as his small frame quivered in fear. Mr. Whitaker paused before him, studying his face with unreadable eyes. Then, to everyone's surprise, he knelt. He knelt before the barefoot boy and placed a hand on his shoulder. You, he said softly, remind me why I started this journey in the first place. Micah's eyes widened. You carry something many adults never learn: gratitude and heart. Today, you are not just a guest. Today, you are an honored soul. Claire sobbed openly now. Mr. Whitaker turned to the crowd. Let today mark more than a marriage. Let it mark the day we truly opened our hearts. To every child like Micah, to every forgotten life we pass by. The guests broke into standing ovation. Photographers lowered their cameras. Chefs came out from the kitchen. Even the string quartet quietly laid down their bows, listening in silent reverence. Suddenly, a small girl, perhaps 6 or 7, tugged at her mother's dress in the third row. Mommy, she whispered, can I give him my shoes? The mother blinked in surprise, then smiled through her tears. Yes, baby, yes, you can. One by one, small acts of kindness began to ripple outward. A woman stepped forward and wrapped a shawl around Micah's shoulders. A man offered to sponsor his education. Another asked if he could volunteer at the foundation. But through it all, Micah stood still, overwhelmed. He had never been seen like this. He had never been heard. And now, he wasn't just part of the story, he was changing it. Claire took his hand gently. Micah, she said, would you walk with us down the aisle? He hesitated. But I'm not dressed. I don't belong. Yes, you do, Daniel said firmly. You belong with us. Micah looked around, heart racing. The chandeliers sparkled above like stars, blessing the moment. Sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows behind them, painting the marble floor in soft amber hues. And then slowly, Micah smiled. It wasn't the smile of a child who got what he wanted. It was the smile of a boy who finally felt loved. Music had long faded. In its place was a silence more powerful than any melody, a silence full of reverence, disbelief, and rising awe. Micah stood between the bride and groom, his small hand in Claire's delicate white-gloved fingers, the other held firmly by Daniel. His torn shirt hung loosely off his thin frame, but in that moment, no one saw a homeless child. They saw courage. They saw a miracle. Are you ready, Micah? Claire whispered, her eyes still glossy with tears. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. I think so. The wedding coordinator, still stunned, gave a trembling nod to the pianist. A new tune began to play, soft, soulful, unlike the grand wedding march. It was a tune of new beginnings. And just like that, they walked. Step by step, the trio moved down the aisle. Guests turned. Some gasped, others wept, but no one stopped them. No one objected. There was no protest, no whisper of disapproval. In fact, Some stood, others clapped. By the time they reached the center of the hall, a full standing ovation had begun. The groom's father wiped his eyes with the edge of his suit sleeve. The bride's mother sat quietly with her hands over her heart, whispering prayers of gratitude. Micah, still overwhelmed, looked up at Claire. "I didn't ruin your wedding?" She stopped walking. She turned and knelt before him again. "Micah," she said softly but firmly, "you became our wedding." Then she did something no one expected. She gently removed the small diamond pin from her bouquet and tucked it into Micah's shirt pocket. "That's for courage," she whispered. "So you never forget what you did, Day." The moment shimmered with beauty and meaning, but across the room, a new figure entered the story. From the back door, a tall man in a faded maintenance uniform stepped into the edge of the scene, confusion and concern etched across his tired face. It was Jared, the hall's janitor. He had just come off his lunch break when one of the servers told him a barefoot boy had rushed the stage. Concerned, Jared had come to help, perhaps to stop a scene. But what he saw froze him. His jaw fell open. "Micah?" he muttered, stunned. "Micah from Shelter 4? Micah turned at the name, blinking fast. "Jared?" The man stepped forward, removing his dusty cap. "You remember me, huh?" he said, voice cracking. "You used to chase pigeons behind the kitchen dumpsters every morning. I used to sneak you extra soup." Claire looked from Jared to Micah. "You knew him? Knew him?" Jared said, laughing with disbelief, "I tried to adopt him 3 times. The system said I didn't earn enough." He bounced from one center to the next, but he always had this spark. Micah ran into his arms without hesitation. "You were the only person who hugged me." The boys set into Jared's chest. The room sighed collectively, tears, sniffles, the rustle of napkins wiping cheeks. Claire and Daniel watched with their hands still clasped. Daniel leaned in, whispered something to Claire. Her eyes widened. Then she nodded. Daniel stepped forward. "Jared," he said, "can I speak with you for a moment?" Jared straightened nervously. "Yes, sir?" Daniel gestured to a nearby chair and waved for the microphone. The music dimmed again. The hall returned to stillness. Daniel looked over the crowd, then back at Jared. "This man," Daniel began, "tried to give a child a home, even when he didn't have much himself. He's a janitor by day, a caregiver by heart. And that boy, he's standing here today because someone like Jared saw him before anyone else did." Jared blinked, unsure where this was going. Daniel continued. "Jared, how would you feel about joining our foundation on staff?" Gasps erupted. Jared looked stunned. "Me? But sir, I clean floors. You change lives," Claire cut in. "And we need people like you." Micah grabbed Jared's hand. "Please," he whispered, "say yes." Jared didn't answer with words. He cried, big full tears that he didn't bother to hide. And then he nodded, pulling Micah into another hug. From across the room, the director of the Whitaker Foundation quickly approached, shaking Jared's hand, congratulating him. Claire reached for a napkin and wiped her eyes. In the center of it all, Micah stood taller somehow, prouder not because of what was given to him, but because of what he had given others. Perspective, purpose, connection. Daniel took the mic once more, looking directly at the guests. "You all came here for a wedding," he said, his voice steady and sure. "But today, you witnessed something far more powerful. A collision of 2 worlds, one of privilege, one of pain, and how a single thread of kindness wove them together." He turned to Micah. "You were invisible to most, but you refused to stay hidden. And now, I think it's time you got a real name." Claire stepped beside her husband. "Micah," she asked, her voice trembling, Would you accept us as your family?" Another silence. Micah's lip quivered. "Really?" he asked. "Even though I'm like this?" Claire nodded, kneeling once again. "Exactly because you're like this. And in front of hundreds High society guests, cameras, musicians, and servers. A barefoot homeless boy said yes to a new life. Later that evening, after the tears and standing ovations had faded into soft conversations and candlelight, the wedding hall no longer felt like a celebration of just two people. It felt like a rebirth of something larger. The tables were still, adorned with roses. The string quartet resumed a softer melody. But somewhere in the back corner of the hall, the story that would be remembered far longer than the wedding cake or designer dresses was unfolding. Quietly, Micah sat at a round table, freshly dressed in a crisp little tuxedo donated by one of the groomsmen. His bare feet were now inside polished shoes 2 sizes too big. He stared at his reflection in the back of a spoon, still unsure whether he was dreaming. Claire knelt beside him with a plate and hand steak, mashed potatoes, buttered carrots, and a slice of cake taller than his palm. "This is for you." She smiled, placing it in front of him. Micah looked at the food, then back at her. "I don't have to wait for anyone?" Claire tilted her head. "Why would you?" He shrugged. "In shelters, you wait for everyone else. You're last stiff. You're small." Her smile trembled as she tucked a napkin into his collar. "Tonight, you eat first." Nearby, Jared sat with Mr. Whitaker Sr., deep in conversation about how to improve foster care support in the city. For the first time in his life, Jared was being asked for ideas, not just handed instructions. Daniel raised his champagne glass, not in a toast, but to quietly watch Micah from a distance. His eyes, usually calm and composed, were now wet with emotion. He leaned toward Claire. "You know what he asked me just now?" "What?" Daniel chuckled. "He asked if tuxedos were itchy forever, or just the first day." Claire laughed light, joyful, the kind of laugh that only comes when the soul has been moved. Then, suddenly, the host returned to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "we have a very special surprise. The bride and groom have asked to add something new to the ceremony, a vow not between each other, but between themselves. And a young boy named Micah." Micah looked up, startled. "What's happening?" he asked. Claire extended her hand. "Come with me." They walked together, slowly this time, not because they had to, but because they wanted to make every second count. Guests cleared the way without hesitation. Many already stood in tears, cameras forgotten, phones lowered. At the center of the dance floor, under a spotlight, Claire and Daniel stood with Micah between them. Daniel took the mic. "Micah," he began, his voice strong yet gentle, "today was supposed to be the beginning of our new life. And it still is, but not the way we imagined. You came here thinking you were intruding, but in truth, you opened a door in all of us." Claire picked up from him seamlessly. "So we've decided," she said, holding Micah's hand. "If you'll let us, we want you to be a part of this family. Not just in spirit, not just for the photos, but forever." Micah's eyes widened. "You mean, like adoption?" Daniel knelt before him. "That's exactly what we mean." The room erupted into gasps, applause, and tears. Micah blinked quickly, as if trying to process it all. "But I don't even have a last name." Claire took a small velvet box from a nearby table. Inside wasn't jewelry, but a certificate. "You do now," she whispered, "if you want it." She opened the box and handed him the paper. At the top, written in delicate cursive, "Micah Elijah Whitaker." Micah stared at the name. Elijah after Claire's late father, a man she said had believed in helping the forgotten. Whitaker, because now this boy was not a visitor, he was legacy. "You're giving me your name?" he asked in disbelief. Daniel nodded. "We're not giving it, you earned it." The crowd exploded in applause once more. Many people in the room, people who had come for a picture-perfect wedding, now realized they were witnessing something far rarer, a family being born out of fate, not blood. Micah stepped forward, standing tall, gripping the certificate close to his chest. For the first time in his life, Someone had called him by a name that wasn't given by the streets. A name that came with identity and love. He looked out across the sea of faces, some wealthy, some famous, all transformed. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, voice breaking but brave. "But I promise I'll do something great. One day, someone else will be standing here, just like me, and I'll be the one helping him." There were no dry eyes left in the hall. Claire pulled Micah close. Daniel wrapped an arm around them both. Together, they stood not as a couple with a guest, but as a family. As the music swelled once more and the first dance began, guests gently made space. But instead of just Claire and Daniel taking the floor, they invited Micah in, the little boy. Danced barefoot between them, laughter bubbling from him for the first time in years. People joined slowly, a circle of love forming around them. A photographer captured the moment, Claire in her white gown, Daniel in his black tuxedo, and Micah in his oversized suit, smiling like the world finally saw him. That photograph would later be printed in magazines and shared across social media, not because of wealth, but because of humanity. Because in a world that so often forgets the ones who slip through the cracks, this wedding didn't just remember one. It rescued him, and he, in return, rescued them all, reminding every heart in that room that kindness isn't a gesture. It's a legacy. The end.